So buzzword bingo again for leadership: influence. Anyone who knows anything about leadership knows that leaders are there to influence their people in order to provide the output that's required. In 1984, there's a psychologist named Robert Houdini, and he wrote a book, the 6 principles. I think it was called The Powers of Persuasion, is what he called it, but it broke down 6 forms of influence that we can have in order to be able to persuade people to carry out the actions that we want. So whether it be an advertising agency wanting to influence people to buy, or a leader who's trying to influence their people. Later on, about 20 years later, I think it was, a 7th was brought out. So we'll go through the 7 now. So the first one is the idea of reciprocity, i.e. you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Within the leadership dynamic, the Tannenbaum-Schmidt continuum of leadership, the idea of reciprocity falls very much within that transactional style of leadership. Very much, you do what I tell you to do, and at the end of the month, you get your wages. It can go a little bit more that. It can kind of move towards the more transformational style, not right at the transformational end, but more along the lines of, if you're able to get this project over the line early, you will get a bonus of X. It's the idea of reciprocity. You do something for me, I do something for you. It is a really powerful form of influence, but it can have a detrimental effect, because it can have the effect of people stressing themselves out, overwhelming themselves in order to get the reward at the end of it. The second form of influence within Cialdini's powers of influence is the idea of scarcity. Now, this is one that advertisers love to use often. So DFS, for example, how long has their sale been going on for? Probably, well, I'm 43 at the filming of this video, and I can never remember a time where there was no DFS sale. But even me knowing that, when I bought my first, well, I didn't buy my first house, but when I moved into my first house at around about the age of 21, I thought to myself, crikey, there's a sale going on, I need to make this decision right now. That's the power of scarcity. Only 5 left. Sale ends Monday. These are the sort of tactics that advertisers love to use in order to make you speed up your buying process. Within leadership, it can be a little bit harder to use this, but if you imagine a situation where, let's say, for example, so you might have to cut this. I'm trying to think of an example on the moment, but it's... If we
say cut, I'll remember.
Yeah.
That I'm doing it.
Yeah. The way to apply scarcity within the workplace is actually to think of it more of urgency. So scarcity in advertising and marketing forms is that make the buying decision faster. Within the leadership, it's adding a layer of urgency to it. So a project needs to be completed by this time, otherwise we've got contractual penalties that are going to affect the way that we can pay project bonuses or something along those lines. The next one is authority. Now, authority is an extremely dangerous form of influence. So if we think back to World War II, the atrocities committed by the Nazi Party during World War II, absolutely horrendous. But the reality is that the people who actually committed those atrocities were just normal, everyday people like you and I. They weren't particularly evil. Yes, the master plan, the grand plan, or however they termed it, the people who came up with this were very evil, but the actual people committing the atrocities were just normal, everyday people. And during the trials after World War II had finished and the trials that took place, a lot of the excuses used by the people being convicted were just, I was just following orders. There was a study, I think it was in the 60s, by a professor called Milgram. It's called the Milgram Studies. Highly, highly controversial. But he tested this idea of authority. And I'm going to simplify it, but in general, there's two groups of participants of this study. One was a group of actors, and they were put into a separate room with what looked to group one as wires and electrodes. Now, group one knew absolutely nothing was going on. They didn't realise that the people in the other room were actors, and they were told to ask group two a series of questions. If they got it wrong, to give them electric shock. And each wrong answer required the electric shock to get gradually increase, and the increase in that shock went all the way to critical levels. around half of people in group 1 actually pressed the button that would have given the person in group 2 a fatal electric shock. So imagine that. Just a normal everyday person off the street, because somebody in a lab coat with an air of authority about them told them to do it, they did it. They pressed the button that would have given a fatal electric shock. That's the power of authority. It's one of the reasons why people carry out such horrific acts under the guises of I was just following orders. However, in the workplace, power of authority as a method of influence is an incredibly powerful one, so long as you have the authority, the trust, the respect. If your intentions are good and honourable, and as a leader, you're embracing the philosophy of helping people to become better and reaching their ambitions, then you can use authority to a really, really powerful degree. Next method of influence we can look at is one that's known as consistency. And it is what it says on the tin. It's just being consistent. Now, often in the workplace, changes have to happen. The way in which we work changes as technology improves, as a business hopefully scales and grows and more people comes in, things have to change. But as a leader, if we can be consistent in our approach, it helps build trust. And that helps you to be able to exert a level of influence over people because they trust that you're doing the right thing for them. If you're quite a chaotic person and one day you're lovely and nice and friendly and happy and huggy, and the next day you are really angry and difficult to work with, people don't know which of you that they're going to be dealing with. So it creates uncertainty, and that uncertainty very easily leads to mistrust. I feel like I'm on the Star Wars Jedi Council talking about anger leading to the dark side, but in essence, that's where lack of consistency can go. So being consistent in your approach as a human being can be quite hard because we are fragile creatures, we are subject to emotions, but if we're able to manage our emotions and remain consistent, it helps build that trust. Liking is a great form of influence, because if people like you, they're more willing to follow you. However, it's also very, very dangerous. So there are loads and loads of examples of highly charismatic people who are liked massively, who have influenced people to carry out horrific acts. We talked about it earlier with authority as a method of influence. Again, this is another really dangerous one. So two of the most charismatic leaders of the 20th century, Adolf Hitler and Himmler. His first name has escaped me. But they were very, very well liked by their people. They were very, very intelligent, and it wasn't a case of, oh, you like me, so go gas millions of people. It wasn't as simple as that. It was a very much of a progressive state to be able to influence people to carry out those atrocities. But it was the fact that they were liked and people wanted to be liked by them that drew people to them and that allowed them to exert that influence. A far, far less extreme way of doing this in the workplace is just to be a good person. I'm not saying be a nice person. See previous videos on my opinion of being a nice leader, but being a kind leader is important. A kind leader will say the things that need to be said in order to help their people progress and achieve those goals. But that likability is important to get them to want to be influenced by you. The sixth one is a really useful one, is that method of consensus. So often in the workplace, especially when you embrace transformational leadership styles and you're embracing innovation and different ideas from your team and things like that, one of the downsides to that is if everybody's got a voice, well, everybody has got a voice, so therefore everybody has got an opinion. So consensus is a really great way of exerting influence, i.e. if you've got 3 really, really good ideas, what do the most people think? What are the ideas of the majority of people? You can get a consensus. It's far easier then to get real buy-in from the team. The method of influence that was added, I think it was about 20 years after Cialdini's book was published, was one of unity. Now, if you imagine, let's say, football fans, chants in the ground. Somebody will come up with a chant, they'll get people to follow it, but because the rest of the crowd, they're engaged, they feel part of that unit, they identify as the fellow fans, things like that. That's then how these chants become loud and wide, and how you can have 20,000 people chanting the same thing that just one person has come up with. It's that sense of unity. It's feeling as though you belong to a team and you identify as part of that team. It's an incredibly hard thing to do in the workplace. It takes time, but if we can generate a team that feels as part of their identity that they work for somebody who is not only going to help them achieve their ambitions, but make a real difference in the world, we can get that sense of unity. And that means that you can influence people to want to put the hard effort in, to want to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week when a project is struggling. If you can get that, I mean, that's the golden goose, isn't it? To make people want to put that level of effort in. But that's what true unity will give you. It will give you people willing to sacrifice their own personal time in order to help get projects over the line.
That was 11 minutes.